Dr. Chris Smith joins us via Zoom. Happy New Year to you, Chris.
Yeah, Happy New Year, Clarence. Happy 2026.
Yes, indeed. I hope it's going to be a brilliant one for you. Give us a sense of what a New Year's Eve looks like in a miserably kind of cold
Oh,
place like
thanks.
London.
It wasn't miserably cold in my house. Lots and lots of festivities going on, but it's cold today. We actually have rediscovered this thing called winter. So we're back to sort of seasonal norms for this time of year, but it's been a really, really mild autumn. And in fact, 2025 in the UK and in many countries was record breaking because we ended up with the sunniest as well as the highest average temperatures on record, I think, for the year. And many people are obviously pointing to climate change as one of the things that is behind that. And it's hard to argue that the wildfires we've seen, other catastrophic weather events across 2025, including the enormous Hurricane Melissa, I think it was, wasn't it, that occurred over the Caribbean and did enormous amounts of damage, that those are not in some way all linked together. But it's a nice fresh morning here today. And I do, though, wish I could have a bit of your sunshine. That would be nice.
Yeah, it's an absolutely perfect day. Perfect day for the beach today, and I have no doubt people are going to do exactly that because we get a lot of that southeaster blowing at this time of the year, but she's abated for now, and I just know that people are going to be there, and so am I. I'll be there too a little later on.
Only after the
Let's
programme's
talk.
finished, though.
Yeah, after 12, 5 minutes past 12, 1 minute past 12. In fact, I'll be on the beach. I think the big question that we want to start off with, we spoke on New Year's Eve, we spoke about a comment from the Google AI guru about, again, AI showing increasingly protective kind of behavior. And suggesting we need to think through what pulling the plug would mean on AI if that is still possible. And we thought we'd get you to just assist our minds in understanding what they are flagging.
I don't know enough about the story. Tell me more. Tell me more about this.
Okay, so essentially, it was on the 30th of December. The Google godfather of AI said that increasingly they are seeing or noting a tendency of AI for self-preservation. So, in other words, when threatened with termination, it will do various kind of defensive actions in order for you not to go that way.
I think you're probably referring to, by the Godfather, to Jeff Hinton, who I actually spoke to
Joshua,
a couple of
is it
years
Josh?
ago. And because he worked for Google for a long time, and he's one of the architects of how these systems work. But at the end of the day, it depends. AI means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And most people's brush with artificial intelligence will be in the form of large language models, systems like ChatGPT, where
Yeah.
you can feed in something and ask it to generate some content. But these sorts of programs they learn or train on data that humans have generated, and so the way that they operate is that we force feed them enormous amounts of material, and they spot patterns and draw associations between information. Many argue, therefore, they're not intelligent in the sense that all they're doing is drawing out patterns and connections and making predictions about if the following has occurred, what should come next, sort of thing, like predictive text does on a telephone. But there have been examples where, when you ask these systems to explore the space they operate in and look for avenues that they can pursue, and a good example of this is someone I know is working in cybersecurity. Now, hitherto, we've had systems where people earn a lot of money by doing what's called ethical hacking. The idea is that you take people who are extremely accomplished at knowing how computer systems work and you target them at a system and say, find the way in, find me the vulnerabilities. Well, this is very expensive, and again, it's only as good as humans are, so why not try and harness all of the possibilities of the things that humans have thought of in the past, and also try them relentlessly in a way that won't get tired and won't get bored? And they've written various systems, and then they're going to be one of many, but they've written various systems whereby their programs, if you tell it to try and hack into a system, will basically go knocking on every single door and trying every trick in the book to penetrate systems. And he told me it's scarily good, as in there's not much it won't get into. But he had a bit of a shock because their system is equipped with the ability to use any thing at its disposal in order to pursue its end goal. And he left it running some algorithms one lunchtime, went off to get some lunch, and came back, and it was off doing various things on the internet, on Twitter, I think, or X as we now call it. It was in there doing that kind of thing. So these programs are very good at adapting themselves, and this is the point that I think people are making, that when you create a system that is adaptable and has the ability to change itself in order to optimize itself, if the goal that you're setting it becomes one of, well, how do I stop this program from breaking? How do I stop this from being interrupted? Then it will go and find a solution to that particular thing. So it's really what you'd expect from a program that's designed to pursue an end goal. And if the end goal becomes, I don't want to be switched off, because that would be destructive to all the other things that I'm being asked to do, it's going to go and find a very good way to do that. And that may include things that other people have seen. These programs will clone themselves. They will create other ways of operating independent of the normal constraints and guardrails that are being put in place. That's exactly what you would expect when you create something where you give it the ability to manipulate its own existence. And this is one of the reasons why people are concerned about how these systems work and whether we can keep them confined and constrained in a safe way.
Yeah, and they're already interconnected into various other kind of systems across the city, for example, or London for that particular matter. So I think these are the kind of conversations and questions that we're going to be putting to you increasingly in the years ahead. Let's go to genetic memory, a question in, and it reads: if I learn a complex skill like playing the piano, is there any biological mechanism that could pass maybe even the tiniest of predispositions for that skill to my children via epigenetics? Can you pass on the skill of, let's say, piano playing to your newborn child?
Well, let's think about this. In terms of behaviours, there are certainly some innate behaviours that both humans but also very clearly manifest in some animals that are genetic. What examples are there? Well, let's think about dogs. There are some dogs that are really good at rounding up sheep, and the breed, such as sheepdogs, they need to be taught a lot less than another dog to do this kind of thing. Other dogs that go out and they're hunting dogs, for example, they know how to find prey. Those kind of animals seem to instinctively show these behaviours. There are birds like sparrow weavers, for example. They will weave webs on one side of a tree, but not on the other side of a tree. And their children, offspring, do exactly the same thing. So therefore, at one level, there has to be an element of heritability to ability. The way that our genes control the way the body puts itself together must influence the way the brain puts itself together in these animals to give them these abilities. But that's very different as an acquired skill over evolutionary time from me tomorrow learning a new skill and then expecting to pass that on to future offspring. Because if you think about it, when you pass on your DNA to your offspring, you are passing on your genes that you got from your parents, which will have a few changes in there. Each generation has 50 to 100 new genetic mutations or changes that weren't in the previous generation, and that's where these slow adaptations can creep into a population. But the process of evolution doesn't work sufficiently fast for that to be a fixed genetic change that would account for that. Epigenetically, well, there are some examples of how things that we do to ourselves affect our epigenetics, and that affects the next generation. One way this can work is if you have a particular health condition, such as obesity, or, the really good example is starvation during World War II. The Nazis starved the population of the Netherlands in World War II. Some scientists have subsequently followed up the children of the people who were pregnant and starved in the Netherlands at the time, and found that those children have a tendency towards a number of different health conditions that their parents didn't have, and those are all down to epigenetics. So in some respects, a change in behaviour in one group can be passed epigenetically onto offspring. That is not the same, though, as a complex behaviour requiring all kinds of brain circuits and all kinds of connections in the brain to be made and broken in order to learn that skill, being written into your DNA. If it were as simple as that, none of us would have to go to school, would we? Because we'd be born knowing how to speak 5 languages, read music, and also do all the other exciting things that we spend a lifetime learning how to do. Unfortunately, it's not as simple as that.
Let's go to John. John's on the line. Welcome, John, from Deep River. Happy New Year. Go ahead for the Naked Scientist.
Thanks for taking my call. As a science teacher, I'm always concerned we are very much aware of the prostate gland in the human male. It's now very prominent in all its ramifications. The question is, the prostate gland, does it pop up in the horse and in the dog and other mammals as well?
Hi, John. Well, males exclusively have prostates and females don't, in the same way that females have totally different urogenital anatomy. Females have ovaries and uteruses and cervixes and vaginas, and men don't. And the reason is that it's how our bodies put themselves together when we're developing, and these things develop in order to have a role. The role of the prostate gland is to produce the constituents of seminal fluid, which is part of the reproductive process. And therefore, if we look in other animals, yes, you will find prostate glands. And believe it or not, even a fruit fly has a prostate gland. I know this because I was contacted when we first began creating podcasts a long time ago, 20 years ago. We were one of the first science podcasts ever to exist. And I was written to by somebody who was an early career scientist in Australia. And he or she said to me, I can't remember if it was a man or a lady, said, I love listening to your program while I'm dissecting the prostate glands out of Drosophila in my laboratory in the morning. It keeps me sane. You can imagine the difference in scale. A human prostate gland is about the size of a walnut and grows over lifetime to become a tangerine-sized thing in some people. In a fly, much, much smaller, but it does the same thing. It is a gland. It produces the constituents of seminal fluid. It's crucial for reproduction. The difference being that humans are very long-lived, and the prostate grows naturally over our lifetimes under a process called benign prostatic hyperplasia. And this is a condition that can cause problems because as it gets larger, it can obstruct the flow of urine, but it's not the same as prostate cancer. That's completely different. But many other animals don't live long enough for this to be a problem. But in us humans, it becomes a behavioural problem because it gets us up at night. And if you develop prostate cancer, which about 100% of men aged 80 will do, but it doesn't mean it's going to be a lethal disease, but we are going to get this. It's an inevitability of ageing because we're so long-lived. It causes a problem for us. Other animals, much less long-lived, less testosterone affecting the prostate, therefore lower risk of developing these sorts of problems. And hence it's surfaced as a problem in humans, but less of an issue in other animals.
Okay. Well, thank you. So I have a liberty of asking a question, quick one.
John, you're welcome. It's a new year, and we are going to be good to you.
We study the anatomy of the human body and other animals to the finest details. In having bony fish, and we in Cape Town know the snook so well, and the tuna type, has every bone and every thread in the fish been studied, and is it significant?
Well, I mean, the answer to this sort of question is if you're asking with the word ever, every, never, always, there's always going to be an exception. So the answer is there will always be fish that we haven't discovered yet or haven't documented properly yet. So the answer to that is going to be no. But we have studied fish incredibly carefully because fish are our evolutionary ancestors, and you can find correlates of the bones you will find in fish, you will find in humans. And if you look at a human embryo as it develops, the head end of an embryo and a lot of the main blood vessels and things, they develop in a series of what are called branchial arches. The branchia are the gills in fish, and so you can see the same pattern of development happening in a human embryo as you do in how a fish develops. And this is used as evidence to point to the fact that our ancestors were fishy-type tetrapods, animals that were fish that then grew limbs and crawled out onto land about 300 million, 400 million years ago. And as a result of us inheriting the genetics and the developmental legacy from them, we go through many of the same processes of development that they do, and we can see that written into our evolution.
A question in from Bradley. If nothing sticks to Teflon, how did they get the Teflon to stick to the metal pan in the
classic
first
one,
place?
this one, Bradley. Well, the answer is that when you make the Teflon, you actually make the chemical and bond it to the material because it does actually stick very happily onto the surface that you stick it down onto, which is the surface of the pan. But the architecture of the Teflon, once it's on the pan, the surface architecture it creates is extremely hydrophobic. It's very good at keeping substances apart and across its surface so that the substances don't stick to the surface, and it is the architecture of the surface that is the non-sticky bit. And these sorts of substances there's great interest in them, both from the perspective of being non-stick, but also the other possibilities being very low resistance to friction and that kind of thing. So it's actually how the atoms and molecules arrange themselves on the surface to create the right electric field configuration so that substances like water can't get in between those molecules and stick and get their fingers into the architecture of the surface. It produces a very, very smooth surface, but that doesn't mean you can't stick it down when you're making it onto a surface in the first place, because as you say, you'd never be able to stick it onto the pan.
Okay, then Ivan writes, why has a flame no shadow? Is it because it is not solid?
Well, flames do actually have a bit of a shadow. We actually took photos of it to prove it as an experiment for the Naked Scientist once. But a flame is vapor. And what do we mean by that? When you boil water, you take a liquid, or if you took ice and boiled ice, it would turn into vapor, which is basically water molecules which have turned into the gas phase. Well, when you put a log on the fire, you are cooking the log and driving volatile chemicals, vapors, out of the log, which are at a high temperature. They then mix with oxygen from the surrounding air, and this enables a combustion process to occur. So the flame isn't actually made of anything other than very, very hot molecules which are floating around in a high concentration in one space and one place, mixing with oxygen, burning, and the colour of the flame is because you are exciting the molecules which are in there. And if it's an orangey flame, it's because it's probably got bits of carbon in there and partially burned hydrocarbons, and they glow orange. And if it's a blue flame, it's probably like a gas flame, for example. It's probably because you've got bonds between carbon and oxygen, which are being made and broken all the time. And when you give energy to those bonds, they give out blue light. But the flame doesn't have a classic shadow in the same way that if I put something in the way of a bit of light, it stops light going through. But it does have a shadow in the respect that because you've got a difference in temperature, because the flame is hot at different places, therefore the air is hot, it will bend the path of light in a different way. And also it will absorb some colours of light. So there is a shadow, because when you see orange coming out of a flame, it's going to absorb certain wavelengths of light and emit others. So therefore there's a shadow, a relative shadow of different colours as well. And you can actually see this. If you put a film behind, or a piece of paper behind a flame, you will see a flame outline on the bit of paper because of this refraction effect of light being bent by the difference in temperature and the difference in density of the air, and also the differential absorption of different colours and wavelengths of light because of the colour of the flame. And you can see this very subtly. And we did challenge a photographer to take us a photo of it for a book we wrote called Crisp Packet Fireworks, and he did. You can just about see yourself pouring carbon dioxide. You can just about see the shadow of a flame for those reasons.
A question in from Lawrence. Are there creatures, animals alive that see more colours than humans do?
Absolutely, loads of them. The humble honeybee can see into the ultraviolet, and this is why flowers make all these exciting patterns and colours. We think they're there for our benefit. They're not. Flowers are there to attract pollinators, including things like bees, and some of these flowers produce all kinds of exciting patterns that we can't see, but other animals can. The mantis shrimp, for example, that lives in the shallow seas, can see into the ultraviolet and can see blues and purples that we absolutely can't see. Why? Because it gives them an advantage in either finding food, finding prey, spotting predators and avoiding them. The thing that gives us our colour sensitivity are the pigments in our retina. We have rods and cones in the retina that see colours, and we have some that are most sensitive to light at the red end of the spectrum, some that are more sensitive to light at the middle of the spectrum, a greeny colour, and some which are more sensitive to light at the blue end of the spectrum. And the relative combination of the contribution or excitation of those cones is the colour that we see. So therefore, if you vary the kind of cone you've got, or you vary the chemical in the cone, in our case we have a chemical called rhodopsin, which is the light sensitive molecule. If you vary the recipe of your rhodopsin, you can make it sensitive to different colours of light, and that's exactly what some animals, including some birds, do. And there's even a theory that birds may be able to see magnetic fields. A slightly different mechanism, but magnetism isn't a colour, of course. It's not an electromagnetic wave, but it's still seeing things that you can't see with traditional, what we regard as visible light, but other animals certainly can.
Tamsin says, my brain runs on a little bit of electricity. Why is it that AI needs a massive energy-hungry data center just to simulate a simple conversation? I think the gist of the question is there something structurally magical about biology that silicon is missing?
Well, biology's had millions of years to hone itself. Our brains have been evolving over millions of years, hundreds of millions of years, to become extremely energy efficient, because nature does not waste a thing, because the difference between life and death could be wasting energy. So we've evolved to have a brain. If you're any animal or anything on earth, you've evolved to have a brain which is sufficiently big to make you successful in your particular niche, but not too big. And in humans, our brains have grown to a size that, in fact, we're at the cusp of what makes it possible even to be born, if you think about it. We're born very early, because if we got much bigger, then it would be very difficult for us to be born. So our brains have evolved very, very far. They consume about 20% of the energy your body uses. If you look at where the oxygen goes in your body, and you can tell that from where the blood goes, about 20% of the oxygen in every breath you take, and therefore 20% of the calories you're burning at any moment in time, is going into your brain. And that's despite the fact your brain makes up only about 2% of your body mass. So it's an incredibly metabolically hungry organ, but it works very, very efficiently. And the average wattage of a human is about 100 watts. It's about 2 watts per kilogram as a human being. And if the brain is accounting for about 20% of that, your brain energy is equivalent to a 20-watt light bulb glowing above the heads of everybody who's listening to this program. So yes, your brain is electronic. Yes, it's electrical. It's been well optimized by many, many, many millions of years of nature getting rid of what's not useful, optimizing for what is useful to make it as efficient as possible. We are not there with the evolution of computers and computer chips yet. So unfortunately, our computers that we do this with are extremely inefficient in comparison. You're quite right.
Gotcha. Let's play Veronica's voice note.
Morning. This is just such a random question, but it's something I often wonder. Why does a mosquito announce its arrival in that high-pitched hum? I mean, surely its survival instinct would be better without it, so it wouldn't be swatted or sprayed or whatever. But there it arrives with its wine and gives you plenty of notice to do away with it, actually.
Question.
It's brilliant. It's brilliant. Yeah, thanks, Veronica, for that one. Well, the answer is it announces its wine because it's flapping its wings. It's flapping its wings because it needs to fly. So it's giving the game away, unfortunately, by necessity. It's not telling you it's there because it wants to. It tells you it's there because you are sensitive to the sound, because your ears have evolved to be sensitive to that sound, because that mosquito may play a threat or pose a threat to you. But mosquitoes also do use their wing beats to mate. And about 20 years ago, scientists discovered that mosquitoes find each other by finding the wing beats, and then they find a mosquito they would like to mate with by synchronizing their wing beats. So you've actually got footage, or there is footage of mosquitoes lining up together, and they will synchronize the whine. And when they fall into synchrony, it means this mosquito likes this mosquito, and they buzz off and they make more mosquitoes.
Thank you. Consultant virologist at Addenbrooke's Hospital, Cambridge, our very own naked scientist, Dr. Chris Smith. We'll chat again next Friday, just after 9:30. This is where you get your questions answered.